Okay, it looks like we are live. Hi, Nana.
Yes.
How are you?
Hi, Lynn. Thank you so much for having me here. I
It's
appreciate it.
great to see you. I'm excited to do this. And on a Saturday, only us
Yep.
crazy beauty founders would do this, right?
Yep. We work all the time. So
Y-
par for the course.
We do. We work all the time, and my family used to give me shit about it and say, like, what, do you have a clean beauty emergency? And I'm like, yes, I do. I have lots of clean beauty emergencies, as a matter of fact. But now they've kind of accepted it, let's just say. So
Yeah.
hopefully yours have too. So
Yeah. I have little kiddos. So they always ask me, they're like, why are you always working? And I'm like, well, because when you run a business, it runs all the time. You can't just not work.
hopefully it instills some like positive values and work ethic. I mean, I grew up with two entrepreneurial parents, and I don't think I fully realized how much that impacted the way I approached work until
Yeah.
I started my own business. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I remember folding brochures and
Yep.
mailers and doing all that for my parents. And so
Yeah. I
it
have
hopefully will sink in.
Oh yeah, I have a 4 and a 7 year old, and they're awesome helpers. I did a show last week, and they were my packers. They were my set designers.
Oh my
Whenever
God, I
I,
love it.
yeah.
And what do they
So
think about your products? Let's just jump in. So, okay.
yeah,
So Nana is the founder of Marigoldbub, which is a really beautiful line of products for babies and for grown-ups, which I think is very interesting because usually people pick a lane.
yes, they do pick a
And
lane.
but why not have products for mom and baby? It makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is smart. So just some context for anyone watching. So that is her brand. It is Ayurvedic. She will share a bit more about it. But yeah, I'm just curious, back to the talking about your kids. I'm sure you've used all of your baby products on them for now years. Did they ever mention anything? Did they ever ask you about it?
No, it's funny because like they think that mommy owns a business, and that's a really cool thing. And I don't think they have fully made the connection that all the things that I use on them, like my founding product is a baby massage oil. And
Yeah.
then I'll give you a quick story. So my daughter was about 6 months old, middle of pandemic. She has this like rash all over her skin. We grudgingly go to the dermatologist, and he's like, "Oh, let's put her on steroids." And I'm like, "Ooh,
Oh, no.
I'm not good with that."
Yeah, no.
So we came back home. We thought about it, and I thought back to my grandfather was an Ayurvedic practitioner. And so everything he did was, very natural, home based, followed the entire, um, routines of Ayurveda. And I literally was like, I'm sure there's something I can find that could be just as effective. And that is essentially how the very first product, I'll show it right here, the baby massage oil was formed. And 2 weeks later, voila, the rash was gone. And then my
Mm.
husband is like, "Oh, can I use it for psoriasis?" I'm like, "You can try it. What would it hurt?" And then it just was like my friend's like, "Oh, when's the next time you're gonna make a batch? Can I have some?" And so it just organically grew. But I don't think my kids have made the connection between stuff I put on them, and that's the exact same stuff that is going in the bottles. So um, the adult line is interesting because their running joke is it makes mommy beautiful because they see it in my bathroom. So
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so they do kind of put that together. That's interesting. So many founders start their lines out of a personal need, a personal pain point. So it makes sense that that's kind of what led you to do it. But how did you go about the formulation process? Because that's not easy. Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
I mean, I was a chemistry lab in my own kitchen. And then when
Yeah.
I found what I thought I found the right, mix of things, and it was going to the lab and having them test it, having them, make sure that it was shelf stable and all of that. And so handing it off to them, making sure they could test it. And I did not realize this. This is my first foray, how much back and forth we would do. Because it would send
Yes.
me a sample. I'm like, nope, not quite right back. And we'll
Yep.
go back. And we're like back to the back to the drawing board. And then it's like you move one thing, and something that I could thought I could make in my kitchen took like a really long time to get it right with like a manufacturer. And that process, I completely underestimated how long that took, and all the, you know, different iterations we went through for every single product. So that was a new learning for me as a founder. I did not know all that went into it to produce
It-
at scale. You know, it's one thing to kind of make
yeah,
your
yeah,
whip up your own shea butter at
yeah.
home, but then when you try to do it at scale, I had completely underestimated that.
Well, and now there's all those regulatory requirements around the manufacturing process and whatnot, which makes it quite hard for small businesses to be honest, because, we're just not set up to do all that kind of, whatever you want to call it, substantiation, certification,
Yeah.
whatnot. But I do think it's good for the industry overall. I mean, my issue with the industry, not to digress, is that it's not the small brands that need to be regulated, in my opinion. It's the larger ones that have the toxic chemicals still in their products.
Oh my
So,
goodness, I couldn't agree more. So the adult line, that's how it came out, because I was
yeah,
nursing, and everything that I found on the shelf was, I was like, I can't use this. I can't pass this through. And I'm like, why am I walking into a department store or in like a pharmacy and finding these brands that, and who is telling the moms out there that are nursing or pregnant that, hey, don't use that because you're
right.
essentially ingesting it in your body. And that's essentially how the adult line came out to be. I was self-solving my problems, and then it just became a thing. And you're absolutely right, because it was challenging for me to find a manufacturer who understood Ayurveda. And I was
Yeah.
very
Yeah, that's very specific.
yeah, it was very specific, right? And so I had to find somebody who understood it. I had to find somebody who had, the right facility, because, I was looking for certification, I was looking for quality. And then I was also, being part of this conscious beauty collective, wanted to make sure that everything I did was like Leaping Bunny certified. So I was,
Yeah.
then you narrow that down even more, and it was such a hard time. And even when you found it, to your point, as a small business owner, just doing your first batch with all of those requirements, all of those obligations, it takes long and is surprisingly expensive. And you're like,
Mm.
it's like, I just want to run one batch to see if this is even a thing. And you don't realize the time of investment it takes in there, particularly, especially if you're like so specific about the things that you want in there.
People don't realize, and if there are other founders who are thinking about launching a beauty line listening to this, it is a lot of work, because it's
Yes.
not just getting your formula right, which it took us 10 years. My co-founder worked on our formula that long.
Oh,
Crazy,
wow.
I know.
Yeah. I
But
believe it though.
yeah, just because you also want to do testing, and we wanted our product
Yes.
to work on like every hair type and texture, which means we have to find all kinds of different people and
Yes.
ethnicities and get people to try it and get enough people to feel confident in the results and all that stuff. And then every time, to your point, we did a change, that process starts all over again. So it's
Yeah.
literally, but but it's not just getting the formulas, and then of course the packaging, and now we have to add the responsible person on our packaging. So there's
Yeah.
that. And again, when you're a small business and you do a new packaging run, it's like
Start
thousands of
all over.
dollars. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And
I
so
actually
it's a
went
lot.
through that this year, because when I launched the baby line, everything was sustainable. But in my adult line, I still had room. So I had to change the packaging for some of my other products. It's like you had to run a net new batch and you were starting
Yep.
all over again. And it was like so expensive. And I think a lot of people have a misconception, particularly, I think there's like a lot of private label beauty providers out there that,
Yeah.
hey, I can start up my line and, it's going to be super simple. It is a lot of time investment, and a lot of work and a lot of learning that, like, I know didn't expect to learn so much along the way about social media, about manufacturing, about branding, packaging, the things that, like, I have a newfound appreciation for what goes on the shelf now because I know all the work that
Yes.
went behind it.
Yeah, because you're right. Just getting the product is only a very small part of the
Mhm.
equation. Then, and I've had this conversation with several founders because they're like, why isn't my product not selling? I'm like, you can't just put up a website and expect people to show up. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to do all this work to actually, get people there, explain what your product is, what it does, what the benefits are. And people also, they're a little not suspicious, but cynical. They want to see reviews. They
Hmm.
want to see the before and after picture. Like they don't want to just take your word on it because there's so many beauty products and it's so competitive. And there are a lot of products that don't perform very well. The
Yeah.
irony is that it's our small brands, I think, that we are putting so much care and effort into making sure our products do perform really well and are clean and are giving back and are leaping bunny and are vegan,
Yeah.
that, again, we're really not the problem. It's those, you know, I had somebody tell me the other day that she was gifted a La Mer and was so excited because it was like, oh my God, I'm super happy to get a La Mer cream because it's so expensive. And she used it and broke out. It was the only thing that changed in her routine. And I was like, wait a minute, seriously?
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, but back to your line. I'm curious to know, like, so from an Ayurvedic principle perspective, are there certain ingredients? Are there philosophies? Are there things that you want to make sure that all of your products have in them that kind of, you know,
Yeah. I
do what
think,
you want them to do, basically.
yeah, from an Ayurvedic perspective, the general philosophy is from the plant to the product should be the least amount of distance. So the least
Mm.
amount of processing that you can get so you get the best efficacy for those herbs is generally the whole principle of Ayurveda. What's interesting is, if you're familiar with Ayurveda, there's, constitution types. So there's a Pitta, Vata, and Kapha constitution types, and generally they have different skin types.
Hmm.
So in designing this line, I didn't want to go and have like 20 different SKUs for a very specific
Yeah,
line
no, that's too much.
because you can't do that. It's too
Yeah,
much.
too
And
much.
so I literally distilled it down to what are the herbs in which everybody can use, they can shift with your body. And then how do I ensure that, like, from the plant to the bottle, I have the least amount of processing? And so that immediately took out things like essential oils, and it took out
Yeah.
things like perfume, because essential oils, a lot of people don't understand, are very processed and, like, go through um a lot of, there's a lot of tampering that happens. And so everything is like cold pressed oils, and I have to make sure that I'm, getting as much efficacy as I can out of the herbs I'm putting in the products. So in the adult skincare line, and because it was very focused on being safe while you're nursing and pregnant, I stayed away from anything that I thought people would get a reaction to. And that's a wide list of things, right? So things like, I use things like amla, which is a citrus fruit. It's very potent vitamin C, but you can trace it back to, like, the fruit. It's, similar to oranges in that sense. And then I use a lot of fruit-based acids, so pineapple and papaya. I use things like saffron and turmeric. So because I knew, A, they would work for majority skin types, and B, they had all the properties I was looking for. They're anti-inflammatory, they're antifungal, they're naturally protecting your skin, and they help create the barrier so you're not getting damaged. So that's essentially how the thought process came down. And it was interesting because I think a lot of times people will pick up my products and they'll look at the ingredients and they're like, well, these are all things that I'm familiar with, and I like, how effective is this really going to be? Like, is this truly,
Hmm.
yeah, is the efficacy truly there? And funny, I have a funny story. So my mother-in-law uses Sunday Riley, for those that know out there, and she uses like the lactic acid and all of that. And so when I ran my first batch, I gave her my adult
Mm.
skincare line, which has this thing, which is age-defying oil, and it has like Indian licorice and amla and a whole bunch of cold pressed oils that are fantastic. And she called me a week later and she's like, you know what? I don't use my Sunday Riley anymore. This is far better. And I
Yeah.
was like, that is the best compliment I
Do you
could
get
get.
along with your mother-in-law, by the way?
I do. I
Oh,
do.
good. Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
I was like,
excellent. I
yeah, I was
love
like,
that.
it was such a great compliment. And I think it really helped me kind of demystify the things that just because they're sustainable, vegan, cruelty free, they are just as effective as what you're going to find in like a chemically based product. So
It is interesting. I do think there's still a little bit of a misperception that good for you products are not high performing.
yeah.
And I actually have found in my experience working with all the CBC brands, it's kind of the opposite. And I think it's because we put such high quality ingredients like what you're talking about, because the point about essential oils, like there's a carrier oil, and to your
Yes.
point, like people don't realize that when you're buying it, it's not just that one thing that you think it is.
Thing. Yeah.
And so, and some stuff can be, what's the word? Comedogenic or
Hmm.
clogging your pores.
Yeah.
So some stuff is actually counteractive. But I do think for small brands like ours, what you're talking about is like I can almost smell the product the way you're
Hmm.
describing it. And then I bet you don't add fragrance because you're using ingredients that all smell really good. So it's going to come from that.
Yeah.
Um, but our quality of ingredients is almost like second to none. So when people ask me like, well, why is your shampoo so expensive? I'm like, well,
Expensive. Yeah.
first of all, you use a lot less. That's the other thing. When it's a really high quality product, you're not putting, tons and tons of product in your hands, and then you can literally use this much of it. So people kind of have to rethink the value equation. I almost think we're at that point where it's almost like Starbucks and regular coffee, where it's like it's better
Yes.
and reason and it's the quality and it's the taste and that in our case the efficacy, it's what it
Yeah.
does.
And you're so on point. So the diaper rash cream, which I have, it has, licorice root, mustard seed oil, shea butter, and neem oil. So it is more expensive than your A&D that you're going to
Yeah.
find sitting on the shelf because I'm putting better quality products in here. And you won't use it as much because once you use it and your kid doesn't have that rash anymore, what you find with the commercial products is the skin is dried up, the skin is peeling, and then now you're buying
It's like a
another product to
cycle.
solve the
Yeah.
problem. Whereas if you're using this one, it already has the shea butter, it has all the natural, moisturizers. So you're not using two products, you're using one product and you're not even using as much. So you're so on point that I think consumers have a hard time translating because they compare dollar to dollar
Yes.
oftentimes, not necessarily ingredients. And I know it's turning. I find a lot more people reading labels now and really
Yes.
asking questions, but I still think that we have a long way to go there.
Yeah, so I have to tell you that when we were doing our own Conscious Beauty Collective stores, we did 4 of them, and I basically increasingly worked more frequently as we
Yes.
did the stores because I felt I had to. And by the end, I was working in the store 5 or 6 days a week when we had our store here in Palm Springs. But people would come in the stores and they would ask the most interesting things. Like they really to your point, like people are curious, but as industry people, we kind of assume, well, people know that sulfates are bad, or people know that
Yeah.
parabens are bad, or people know that phthalates, they don't. And they don't know what any of those things actually mean or do, or what even to look at on the label, because sometimes it can be kind of hiding on the label as a different name. So I always try to say to people, start with the label and at least try to educate yourself around the basic baddies. You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
ones that we all kind of agree on. And then from there, if there are things that you don't like or you're allergic to or that you're sensitive to, screen for those too. But at least you're going to clean out the majority of stuff out there because boy, to your point about, looking for products for yourself that were clean, it is so difficult to go into any kind of mass Target, Sephora,
Oh,
Ulta, even
yeah.
though they have clean sections per se, it's still really difficult to navigate. And sometimes it's a product is clean, but the brand isn't.
And
And that's,
it's interesting because everybody's definition of clean is also different. Like there's not a
yes.
agreed upon definition of clean. And you're so like one of the things that I notice is the role marketing and packaging plays into all of this, right? And so as someone who where sustainability is really important, I don't necessarily add extra packaging, and you won't
Yeah,
find like
no.
those big fancy things that you will find in a La Mer, for example. And I think that also flips people's perception about quality and efficacy. So like the stretch mark oil that I have comes in an amber glass bottle because A, it's sustainable, and B, that's the best way to preserve it. And I'm not going to put any wrapping or anything else around it. And then when I compare it to another other stretch mark creams that and oils, they're like so beautifully packaged, and there's like layers of either like plastics around it, and different pumps and this, that, and the other. And it's almost like giving the perception that it's going to be more effective than something that is in a simple bottle, but it's actually the complete opposite.
That's a really interesting thought. I hadn't put that together before, but you're right. It's like the packaging and the luxness of the
Yeah.
packaging can really screw with people's perceptions. And it's not about that. And actually, I do think people are getting more like, at least the beauty editors are saying, like, do not send me these big press kits with all this stuff in them anymore. And
Yes.
maybe that'll trickle down to consumers too, because I think consumers need to be more mindful to know that, like, if they're getting something and it's coming in a box within a box within a,
Yeah.
that's not going to be sustainable, and they should be asking questions around that. So
Yeah.
if the brand is doing that, then what else are they doing? You know what I mean? Like, what
Yeah.
other practices do they have in place that are maybe not so sustainable either? So that's fascinating. So what's your favorite product out of all of your products? Do you have a favorite?
I do. I do. I face polish.
Ooh.
So it's an exfoliator. And so I think that was the most challenging thing for me to find when I was nursing and pregnant is you can't use any of the acids. I have oily skin. I live in
Mm,
Nashville where it's humid and I'm just
yeah.
like an oil producing machine all the time. And so the face polish is the one that like permanently just lives in my bathroom because it has pineapple, papaya, and lemon peel. So I can
Oh,
get that
love that.
really deep clean without actually getting like the topical acids on me or, absorbing those in my skin. So this is like, no, I cannot run out of this one.
Oh
It
my
just
gosh.
like,
And what do you use to create the grains in there? Because I grew up on, I'm a little embarrassed to say it, but St. Ives apricot
yes,
scrub, which by the way, the apricot is not apricot, it's crushed walnut shells,
walnuts.
which
Yes,
are very abrasive. Because think
yes,
about if you crush, they're not like smooth. And then the other alternatives are microplastic.
yeah. So it's funny you bring that up because I experimented with walnuts. I
Okay,
experimented
yeah.
with ground rice, because rice is also one of the
Oh,
things that
interesting.
you can
Yeah.
use for exfoliation. I experimented with dried up orange peels, like
Oh,
as one of the
interesting too. Yeah.
exfoliations. And to your point, even after they were into their powder form, they were very, very abrasive on the skin. And I
Mm.
could immediately see like this is not something that would, you could maybe do it once, but I need something like this pretty consistently in my
Yeah. Oh,
routine.
I
I
agree.
cannot do that. So I actually went with iron oxide crystals. And so they are very, very fine, but they are iron elements that I feel comfortable putting on my face because I know exactly where they're coming from versus microplastics where you don't know how they're getting absorbed. But this is one thing that I want to continue to find a better alternative, and I'm going to keep experimenting and seeing like how I can modify the recipe. But for the moment, it's iron oxide crystals.
That's very interesting. And you just gave me an idea. Wouldn't it be fun if we did a monthly challenge call with the CBC where one founder threw out, like you're saying, like, I'm looking for an alternative to this ingredient.
Yeah.
And we had a group of founders kind of spitballing and talking, and we're doing it on a live so
Oh,
people can
I
see the
would
process.
love that. I would love, love,
Yeah.
love that.
I think so too, because I'm sitting here thinking one of my big challenges is we're in the shower, right? So I can't
Yeah.
have glass. People have a perception also of aluminum of leaving ring marks and rust.
Yeah.
So even if it doesn't really, the consumer perception is that it does. And
Yeah.
so we made big sustainable ceramic bottles. They do
Ooh.
break, but they're like, like if a terracotta pot breaks, it's
Yeah.
like chunks. It doesn't leave little shards that are going to cut you.
Yeah.
So that was our solution, but I still don't love that it does break and it's kind of
Great.
heavy
Yeah.
and it's like, so I would love to find out, to figure out what else. And I've been looking and I just have not
Have
found
you
an
tried
alternative.
bamboo bottles?
The problem is when you have a, a liquid
Mm,
like ours, it doesn't interact well with algae packaging, sugarcane packaging, bamboo, like the things
yeah.
that could be
I would
alternatives.
Yeah,
So
I would think hemp would be also react then because like I'm finding more and more founders and using hemp packaging because they have
interesting.
found ways to make it, sturdy. Specifically, if they'll have what I've mostly seen it is they'll have glass bottles for moisturizers, like the little small ones, but the tops instead of plastic are made with hemp. They're hemp lids and I'm wanting to try that.
That is
So
interesting. Yeah, that might be worth, or at least change some of the component parts,
yeah,
um, to, because I think we all want to be better, but it's not that easy. It's just not that easy to find those products and then source them. And then, of course, we have tariffs looming and everything else. But
yeah.
anyway,
And it's about progress, not perfection, right? I have to remind
yes,
myself
I
of that
love
every
that.
single day because I'm like, okay, I was, because I don't have very many SKUs. I have 8 SKUs, and my goal is to have all 8 of them completely recyclable. And today I have 5 of the 8. And I was like, okay, well, that's at least better than a
Yeah,
year ago where it was only 3 out of 8. And so
yeah,
like I'm gradually working towards it, but
I
it's
love that.
unreasonable to think that I'm going to get it all done in one time around. It's just not feasible.
I'm writing down progress, not perfection, because that's going to be one of our quotes we put up. That is good. Because it is true. I think sometimes, people can get very idealistic about, but we're on a journey and it changes all the time. Stuff that we thought, I mean, everyone thought that water bottles were great until all
Yes,
of a sudden they're not, So it's like we're solving one problem, we're creating another problem. I mean,
that's the problem.
it's never like done.
Yeah,
Anyway. Well, I know we're going a little long, but this was fantastic. I feel like we could talk for hours probably. And maybe we'll do another one in a couple months when, we can pick up on this thread. But I think we're going to do I like the idea of doing a monthly challenge and,
yeah,
and we can all riff on that. Maybe then the first one will be around packaging
Ooh, I would love that because I'm always looking for a better option every
Yeah.
single time.
Well, thank you for joining. And tell people where they can find you. Of course, you're at Crozet, Virginia at Wendell
Yeah,
House, which is beautiful, by the way. That
and
is, Sarah's done such a good job with that. And she is loving our products and pushing our products and telling
yeah,
people. And it's going to be such a good partnership. I have so much gratitude for her and what she's doing. And but yes, so Wendell House, but and on your site, which
yes,
is
marigoldbub.com. And I actually just migrated my site over to Shopify. So it's a
oh
brand new
good.
site.
Yeah,
Um, and you can subscribe to the product so you don't have to run out.
great.
Yeah, so get on marigoldbub.com, and I'd love for folks to follow me on Instagram as well at marigoldbub. You know, a big part of Ayurveda is education, and we post a lot of content around different pieces of Ayurveda and how they can be incorporated in, you know, your everyday life. So if nothing else, you'll learn something new.
I love that. That's brilliant. Well, thanks for joining, and we will
Thank
see
you.
everyone next